Chapter 113. Introducing Xianzhi. In Jinan City, Grandmaster Liu Nian went to look for Long Wanyu. Long Sanqian went to report to the Divine Martial King. Sima Changkong brought Gu Hai and his group to stay. In a small courtyard, Gu Hai and Sima Changkong drank tea and chatted. The king is hosting a banquet in the evening to receive Mergu. Here I will first tell Mr. Gu about the Broken Army's army, Sima Changkong said with a smile. HMM. Gu Hai nodded. Gu Hai recalled. Little Prince mentioned it to me. Well, the young prince personally traveled to the 9-5 Islands with the prince's sincerity. The problem we encountered was that Broken Army's millions of zither figurines attacking the city. It didn't take long for them to break into the city without any harm, but, well, we have a way to deal with it as well. Sima Changkong laughed. Oh, you also saw the Book Dao earlier. In my military camp, there are also some Book Dao powerhouses, and my Sima family's Yellow Springs Destruction Law scripture also shines brightly. As long as there are zither figurines breaking into the city, they immediately enter our Book Dao rules, and are restricted by my Book Dao order, leaving them with nothing to hide. Sima Changkong explained. Gu Hai nodded. The army doesn't dare to step out of the city, or else they will break their 5 senses and become deaf and blind, Gu Hai said in a deep voice. Not bad. How can the army advance if they can't leave the city? So it's not honorable, but it's nothing. We sent assassins, Sima Changkong said in a deep voice. Oh, there was no return, went, and never came back. Several people went, including a heaven-opening palace powerhouse, Sima Changkong said gruffly. A heaven-opening palace powerhouse. Gu Hai raised an eyebrow. Sima Changkong nodded. The heaven-opening palace, entered the Broken Army camp, and was silent, not even the slightest movement of struggle. Liu Yong sat in the place of the main camp, and did not come out. It should be in the Broken Army camp. There are still strong people. According to our repeated requests, it should be a Shushi, Sima Changkong said gruffly. Oh, Gu Hai raised his eyebrows slightly. Less than 10. How come there is one here in King Liu Yong? Sima Changkong smiled slightly bitterly and said, You're right. There are only 8 Shu masters with true heritage, 4 white robe Shu masters and 4 black robe Shu masters. After thousands of years under the heavens, there are only 8 that unborn. I can't tell what's going on, but the Great Jin dynasty has recorded a total of 8 inheritable longevity masters, but on the contrary, there's one in the Broken Army camp. In the face of the Broken Army, ordinary armies can't leave the city, and experts traveling there are also in dire straits, Gu Hai said in a deep voice. Yes, that's why the king wants to ask you to crack less miserables, Sima Changkong said in a deep voice. Gu Hai frowned slightly. Let Gu Cheng crack it. How to crack it? The two chatted for some time. At the main table in the main north of the hall was sitting the Divine Martial King. The Divine Martial King was dressed casually, in a gorgeous brocade robe. His face was broad and unruffled. Gu Hai, meet Grand Marshal Zhenan. Gu Hai gave a slight salute. Mr. Gu is polite. This marshal has long heard of Mr. Gu's great talent, but unfortunately I have no chance to see it. Today I can see Mergu. This marshal is also very pleased. Mergu, please take a seat. Divine Martial King slightly smiled. The attendant at the side immediately introduced Gu Hai and his party to a dining table at the front of the left column of the hall. The 4 of Gu Hai sat down. As Gu Chen sat down, his eyes lit up as he looked at the food on the table and raised his chopsticks to clip it. HMM. The crowd of civil and military officials immediately frowned. One of us hasn't even moved our chopsticks yet. We're all waiting for you guys to come, and you guys come and start eating without even saying hello. Gu Chen, Gu Hai said in a deep voice. Gu Chen's face stiffened and reluctantly put down a piece of meat on his chopsticks, but his eyes kept staring. "Mr. Gu, this marshal toasts you. Thanks for your several strikes to unload Liu Yang's dragon army." The divine marshal king raised his cup and smiled. "Many thanks, Marshal." Gu Hai raised his cup in return. For a while, the civil and military officials raised their cups at once and matched them among the drinks. The wine was drained in one go. The atmosphere in the great hall also eased. "Eat," Gu Hai said to Gu Chen at the side. "Or, Wu." Gu Chen immediately quickly chucked up the dishes. "Mr. Gu, I don't know if you have an opinion about our two armies fighting." King Shenwu laughed. "The marshal is wise, so I won't talk too much." Gu Hai shook his head. "I've heard that Mr. Gu also has a big grudge against Liu Yong. That's why he slashed the great Yingqi in the first place, annihilated the Zhengjin sect in the second place, and annihilated the Kunlong in the third place." The divine martial king looked at Gu Hai. Gu Hai smiled slightly bitterly and said, "Uncommon hatred for Long Wanqing, Long Xiaoyu," the divine martial king said in a deep voice. "Only then did we have today's Zhenan Grand Marshal. Unfortunately, Long Wanqing, alas." Long Shenwu sighed slightly. "Many thanks, Marshal," Gu Hai said sincerely. "Haha, Mr. Gu, I've read about you, sir. You have unparalleled intellect and superb means. Why don't you come with me to level out Liu Yang's army and avenge Long Wanqing and Long Xiaoyu?" Divine Martial King invited. Gu Hai nodded. "This time, I came with the young king, and that is exactly what I want to do." "That would be perfect. This marshal sits down with the 6th Legion. How about temporarily placing it under Mr. Gu's command?" King Shenwu immediately laughed. Commanding the 6th Legion, Gu Hai was slightly puzzled. Gu Hai, however, frowned slightly and did not open his mouth. Taking command of the 6th Legion. It was true that you immediately grasped a large army force. But this was not what Gu Hai wanted. Gu Hai was ultimately the emperor of a country. He could cooperate with you, but he couldn't condescend to you. The identity of the first-class hallmaster is only a guest secretary of the Great Jin, and does not condescend to anyone. Is it possible to enter your military camp, but to be your subordinate? But that tone of the divine martial king was a sincere invitation. Perhaps the great Han Emperor hadn't looked at the divine martial king in his eyes. But just because someone else couldn't look at it, didn't mean he could let it go. "May I?" The divine martial king smiled. After a moment of silence, Gu Hai smiled slightly and said, "The marshal trusts me so much." "Naturally," divine martial king affirmed. Slightly smiling bitterly, Gu Hai said, "Thank you for trusting the marshal. However, since the marshal trusts me, I have a proposal. I hope the marshal won't mind." "Oh, Gu Hai, I am used to being idle, and it's been a long time since I've led an army, so I'm afraid that I won't be able to lead it well." The Grand Marshal said that the 6th Legion lacks a wise commander. "I'll raise a person. I wonder if it's good." Gu Hai laughed. The divine martial king frowned slightly. In the Great Hall, the crowd of civil and military officials also looked at Gu Hai in surprise. "The marshal kindly offered you the position of 6th Legion commander, but you don't appreciate it. If Mergu recommends it, it shouldn't be bad. I wonder who it is." The divine martial king was puzzled. "Gao Xianzhi," Gu Hai said in a deep voice. "I am here." Gao Xianzhi immediately rose and said respectfully. The group of ministers looked at this middle-aged general in confusion, having previously thought that he was Gu Hai's follower. "King Shenwu, this is my close friend, Gao Xianzhi. The Grand Marshal's 6th Legion can be placed at the helm of Gao Xianzhi," Gu Hai solemnly said. "Wow." The ministers in the hall were in an uproar, recommending one of your subordinates. For the marshal to let you, an outsider, take control of the 6th Legion is already a great favor, yet you don't know enough to name an underling. Are you looking down on our army? Some officials even glared at Gu Hai. The divine martial king frowned as he looked towards Gao Xianzhi. When the divine martial king didn't open his mouth, A gnarled man not far away jumped out at once. Gu Hai, you're reckless. The marshal treats you like a national scholar, yet you're neglecting the marshal like this. Are you humiliating us? The gnarled man glared. Your Excellency, Gu Hai frowned. I am the current 6th Legion commander, Bailey War. The gnarled man glared. So it's General Bailey. Heh, why are you sure that I'm humiliating you guys? Which one of your eyes saw that I'm slowing down the Grand Marshal? Gu Hai said in a deep voice. The Divine Marshal King on the side did not open his mouth, but sipped his wine, squinted his eyes, and quietly watched. It's not that I'm neglecting the Great Marshal. You sent an underling, and you want to command the 6th Legion, Bailey War glared. The Grand Marshal needs wise men. As long as he leads the army and fights, he can surpass you guys. Won't that be enough? Gu Hai laughed. Based on him, an underling. Has he ever participated in a cultivator war? Bailey War glared and shouted. Gu Hai looked at Gao Xianzhi and signaled for Gao Xianzhi to answer. Gao Xianzhi took a deep breath and suppressed the tension in his heart, understanding that this was the Emperor honing himself. Back to General Bailey. I have merely led secular armies. Gao Xianzhi took a deep breath and said, merely led a secular army. That is, never participated in a cultivator war. Not even having participated in a cultivator war. How dare you not presume to want to command our 6th Legion? Bailey War glared and bellowed. The Marshal needs a wise man, not a reckless man. Gao Xianzhi returned indifferently. A reckless man? Ha! You, a milquetoast brat, dare to call me a reckless man? Bailey War glared. General Bailey, war is not a presentation of words, Gao Xianzhi said indifferently. Asshole! Bailey War's eyes glared as he seemed to storm out. Bailey War. King Shenwu spoke up. Marshal, this kid doesn't know the heights of heaven. Let me teach him a lesson. Bailey War instantly shouted. The Divine Marshal King frowned. The Divine Marshal King looked at Gu Hai with a slight frown. Sand deduction. Gu Hai looked at the Divine Marshal King in doubt. Sand field push. It's a type of magic treasure. Use your consciousness to enter the magic treasure. Both sides will each command a group of armies, all kinds of soldiers, and engage each other to separate the winners from the losers. It's a magic treasure to learn about war, Sima Changkong on the side explained. Gu Hai, didn't you raise this subordinate of yours? Let him give it a try. I'll let him have 1,000 troops. How about it? Bailey War sneered. Marshal, since General Bailey is interested, then let Gao Xianzhi try. Gu Hai laughed. Good. The Divine Marshal King nodded. Not far away, Bailey War revealed a smug smile. Instead, Gu Hai looked towards Gao Xianzhi and said, Gao Xianzhi, Bailey War has provoked you to answer the battle. Don't underestimate it. Gao Xianzhi's expression was solemn. He instantly understood Gu Hai's meaning. This Bailey War looked reckless and harmless, but there was a shrewdness hidden within, not to be underestimated. Yes, Your Majesty. I will not let Your Majesty down, Gao Xianzhi respectfully said. Quong. Gao Xianzhi nodded and walked to the center of the hall. The two of them stood on either side of the jade platform and placed their hands on the platform. Buzz! The jade platform steeply emitted a light, and the duo's consciousness entered it, slowly closing their eyes. Boom! Above the jade platform, a dazzling light abruptly bloomed, projecting a mountainous and hilly battlefield. At both ends of the battlefield, on one side was Gao Xianzhi leading an army of 100,000 cultivators, and on the other side was Bailey War leading an army of 100,000 cultivators. A sandstorm was about to begin. Gao Xianzhi versus Bailey War. Long Shenwu's army leader vs Gu Hai's army leader.